Hi, my name's Chris Alexander. David Havyatt and I have just done a clustering exercise using a bunch of notes we took on barriers and drivers from our Foresighting Forum and one of the collaborative exercises, and I guess we've just tried to organise them. David's just given a great tour of the themes and the clusters that we came up with. We've got roughly, I think, 14 overarching themes. There's probably a little bit of overlap, but we've got trust, we've got collaboration leading to great outcomes, we've got one around common goals and actions. We've got this great new concept of crisis-unity, which I think goes back to that idea that you should never let a great crisis go to waste. Big question about politics and governance. And then we start getting into really the detail of trying to drive change in this sector, and I think one of the strongest themes on the wall and the clearest themes is around complexity. That word comes up time and time again. And then also into issues around trust. We've chosen to cluster issues around trust with some of the features and debates in the market that we think are driving that mistrust. I guess that's something that we could debate with other stakeholders, whether or not that's a reasonable thing to do. Related, I guess, is issues around, we've got a very complex multi-layered supply chain, and the incentives in that supply chain don't always align. So we've got this real theme around conflicting interests and just, I guess, the recognition that change in any sort of complex system is difficult. I guess the question David and I have just been asking ourselves, and we asked ourselves as we did the exercise, was what on this wall surprises us? And for me personally, perhaps not a surprise, but I think the most interesting cluster on the board for me is this one around perfection, uncertainty, risk, and continuity. And what I really personally see that as telling us is that we have to think differently about how we try and drive change in this market in something that's this complex with this sort of a political and regulatory overlay. We're going to have to experiment, and I think there's a real link from this cluster here under the barriers over to this side of the page where we start talking about regulatory sandboxes and experimentation. So if I had a texture and I was allowed to draw on our wall here in our boardroom at ECA, I'd be drawing a big link from here over to here. But I guess the next challenge for us is, I would think, is to map what is actually happening in the marketplace and through policy processes and through governance right now to see whether or not we're starting to address some of these things. I mean, it seems very obvious to us, and this was something that David highlighted, was that at the very least, we need to think very, very hard about whether all this complexity we're seeing and that people are reporting is a necessary level of complexity in a very sophisticated and complex market like energy, or whether or not we can strip some of it out. Because if we can deal with this underlying complexity issue or reduce it or minimise it, it's going to help us work through some of the problems and the challenges we've got in the market. What we'd love is, we're going to post this on our website, and we'd really value some feedback from other stakeholders about the way we've organised things. There's certainly no right answer here. I think, you know, as provocations go, I think linking trust with things like limited merits review and confusopoly is something that we could really debate. What this complexity picture is telling us, I think, is a really interesting question for people to reflect on, and whether or not there is some level of agreement that we need to change the way we drive change in this market, and there's going to need to be more experimentation, and we're going to have to actually embrace risk. So love to hear from all our stakeholders. Thank you.